diagnosis was very bizarre. You know, it was about a week later before we could get into the hospital, and you just flung so much information, and it's just a whirlwind, and you're trying to deal with this grief, and, you know, they're wanting you to provide physiotherapy for your child, right? And your child's a baby, and they want you to, you know, effectively hit your baby, right? And so you're providing this physio that's like bang, 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 and I'm like, but my kid's fine.
Welcome to the Princess of Possible, where you will hear some inspiring stories of people that have defied the impossible. My name is Emma Money, Cystic Fibrosis Warrior, 2020 Australian of the Year South Australian Local Hero, or as I prefer, the Princess of Possible. Today's show, we have Cassie Day on the show, and I'm very grateful for Cass. You've got quite a story. I didn't really know where to pull and what to pick, so I thought, come on, rock up. We're going to have a chat, and I hope for the people listening or watching, if you're watching us today, you enjoy what we talk about. So I'm going to apologise too. There's 2 apologies from me. I'm also very unorganised on purpose. I didn't send Cass any notes for today. Probably 2 hours before we got the show to hit record, I just sent her a voice message saying, just rock up, you'll be fine.
Gonna be okay.
This is what we're going to talk about. And I don't think I actually really told you in that what we're going to talk about. So what I would love to start off with though is tell me a little bit about yourself, because you have quite a different element, a different angle of cystic fibrosis. You don't have cystic fibrosis.
No.
Someone you love very dearly does. So
Yes.
tell me about this.
Yeah. So I'm Cassie, and I always say that I'm a mum first and foremost to 2 shockingly adult children, 2 boys. So I've got Matthew, who's 20, and Joshua, who's 18. Matthew has cystic fibrosis. But who am I? I'm a high achiever, a perfectionist, a lover of people, you know, I really value relationships and am fascinated about human behaviour. I'm a business owner.
Successful business owner?
Yes, a successful business owner. It's quite funny to say that.
Should be very proud.
You know, I would say that people would see me as an advocate for parents and carers. Super passionate about, you know, supporting people to live lives that are less impacted by disability and chronic illness, less stressed lives. You know, because if we can educate and support people to be able to navigate really complex systems, there's going to be a lot less stress at home and a lot less overwhelm. And people are going to be able to live less inhibited, you know, and
probably
their own lives, as opposed to, you know, living it in relation to, right, that's it, I have a disability, I am the disability.
Yeah, they're not the disability.
Right. So I'm also a nature lover and love camping and getting outdoors, and we'll look to do that in the future. But, you know, there's a few aspects to me.
There is. Now, I want to come back to your business, because I think that's a really important part of your journey and where you're at. But I think what I am really interested in sharing to start with is cystic fibrosis and Matthew.
Yes.
So for many people, you know, when you're diagnosed with a baby with CF, whether you have it or not, if you Google it, it is absolutely petrifying. We advise do not Google, but we all do. So before you had Matthew, what did you know about CF? Did you know anything about it at all?
I absolutely didn't. I knew nothing.
Okay, so when you had him, tell me about that first few weeks when you had him, his diagnosis and all of that.
So when I had Matthew, I was just a few weeks shy of 24 years old.
A baby!
Yeah. And, you know, he was absolutely beautiful, born as perfect as anyone would want. I knew that through those first 4 weeks, I had him at the doctor's a number of times. He was unsettled. He, you know, like had a sore stomach. He couldn't sleep. And so, you know, but you're just told that that's normal with babies. And
I guess being your first, you wouldn't know any different. Which is interesting later on when I had my second, because you have a completely different experience. Very interesting. So I was out showing Matthew off for the first day with my work colleagues. And I was out and about when I got a call from the hospital saying that, and I didn't get the call from the hospital.
my partner at the time did. And it was just a very abrupt, your child has cystic fibrosis, we need you to come in, and the average life expectancy is blah, which was 27 at the time, and that's it. That's all my husband at the time got. And so I didn't know what cystic fibrosis was. I thought he said cerebral palsy, which I was wrong. I had no idea. I'm like, how can this be? My baby's perfect, you know.
Yeah.
And so where I worked was just near my mum, and I happened to like get someone to call her because I was absolutely distraught. She drove me home. We had to go to the hospital, which was Flinders at the time, but it wasn't the CF centre.
Okay.
Right. You happened to be there, and you don't know this.
Right.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I know.
Don't make me cry.
So it was. I'll try not to look at you.
Okay, I won't look at you then.
No, it wasn't. It's not a bad story, but you know, we didn't know anything, and we went to the hospital to be greeted by Professor. I don't know what his name was, the doctor who looked after you, and we'd waited and waited and waited, and we finally saw him, and he didn't introduce himself.
Was it Simon Brown? Dr.
Don't
Simon
know.
Brown? Okay.
He was older, but he just picked up my baby, looked at him, and licked his forehead.
Oh my God.
And we're just like, what's this crazy person doing? Oh, yep, he's got cystic fibrosis. And, you know, here are we all distraught. What the heck is going on? And, you know, I don't know if we actually took in anything in that time. You know, when you're delivered bad news, you're lucky to take in 10% of the information that's sort of provided to you.
Yeah.
But I do remember him saying that they have a young girl, and I think you were 14 at the time perhaps, with cystic fibrosis. I'll try and get you to be able to come up and meet her. And he couldn't arrange that at the time. And then, you know, we went away. But there are other times where you had come into our awareness in our lives without even knowing that you had.
Wow.
But yeah, so to come back to your question, diagnosis was very bizarre. You know, it was about a week later before we could get into the hospital, and you just flung so much information, and it's just a whirlwind, and you're trying to deal with this grief, and, you know, they're wanting you to provide physiotherapy for your child, right? And your child's a baby, and they want you to, you know, effectively hit your baby, right? And so you're providing this physio that's like bang, 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 and I'm like, but my kid's fine, nothing's happening. And he screamed. He was a screamer. Like it was so devastating for him. And I think he suffered trauma from that. You know, you guys suffer a lot of trauma or go through trauma and different phases and stages of trauma. But early on, for me, that was like, I felt like the worst parent in the world.
Especially when
so it was
there's
a
nothing
lot
wrong.
to take in. And he was born at a time where there's this transitional phase. You know, when you were born, when you were a young kid, you were able to see other families and develop connections and relationships with families who were going through similar and the same thing. And so there are positives and negatives to that, which you've discussed.
Yes.
Right. But we were completely isolated. We, you know, I had struck up a friendship with a couple of people, and then we were basically told you can't see them anymore.
And that's due to cross-infection.
And that's due to cross-infection. So we went from a period of being able to mix to not being able to mix anymore. And it was very frowned upon. And cross-infection, not just your general colds, but specific bacteria and germs that CF people can pass on to each other that were potentially dangerous, deadly.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you build up so much anxiety and fear as a young mum.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, and then you're dealt this other blow, because at the end of the day, human connection is everything, right? And making sense of everything is so much easier if you've got other people that you can see and share those things
we can
with.
share
and so we
those.
didn't have that. And so then we missed out on you know, knowing how to navigate the system and health and getting help. And I was a young person. My mum was working, and then she ended up moving away. And so my support system was quite small. This was also in the time that there was no social media.
Yeah, so extremely isolating.
It wasn't until Matthew was 12 that I knew that there were Facebook groups for CF.
Oh, wow.
So he was 12. So I was on Facebook for a really, really long time and had maybe one or two people that I knew of that were parents of someone who had CF. That's it.
So how did you find support in those? I mean, in that time, because like you said, giving physiotherapy to start with is a big thing, let alone creon, pancreatic enzymes. Your whole world would have been completely flipped in the sense you thought you'd have this. And you do have a perfect, beautiful baby boy who's got cystic fibrosis, the most common life-threatening illness. And you now have to manage that. That's your job now. As you're not just mum, you're caring for your child. And I think with CF, we look healthy. So when you're saying you're having to, hit him, so to speak, on his back to help him breathe every day, mentally.
How did I do it?
How did you do it?
So I'm the kind of person that needs to be busy, sitting around and thinking and not wallowing, but really immersing myself in something. It doesn't work well for me. I guess if there's a problem in my life, I might be knocked down for a day or whatever, I get up pretty quickly and I set about doing something about it. And so I didn't know much about the human body. I didn't understand. I felt that I couldn't hold and understand conversations with the medical professionals in a way that I needed to be able to give him the best life. And so I went and studied natural medicine. I didn't know anything about the body. I didn't know what a liver was. And, I knew that we had a liver, but I didn't know what it did. And, and so I studied the body systems and how they all related and why we would need certain medications and what certain bloods would show and what allergies would look like and how the lungs worked and all of those sorts of things, so I could make really informed decisions. And so whilst I wasn't immersed in like the CF world, I actually think it was a good thing for me.
Yes.
Because I didn't live my life according to a diagnosis, right? Yeah. I absolutely rejected right from the beginning a life expectancy or an age. I was like, I'll show you. It was like a challenge.
Yeah, right? Challenge accepted.
And he's going to be this and he's going to do that. Absolutely not. You don't get to tell me how my child's life will be, and I'll show you. And so we said about, doing all the things that you would normally do with kids and not sort of wrapping him up in cotton wool too much. He probably would argue that somewhat. But, and I leaned on my family and I spoke to my friends about it. But I did have one friend who has a daughter who has cystic fibrosis as well. And we spoke a lot, like probably once a week.
Okay.
And that was probably my saving grace because we had shared experiences that no one else probably got at the time. But I didn't know any other young people who had CF. So that was probably a really good thing for me.
I think having that connection, like you said, human connection is such a big thing, and social media not being around back then, and you look fast forward to today, so many people sit behind the screen and get that support, or even, I guess, are in the background reading other people's experience. You wouldn't have had all of that. So
not until he was 12.
That's a long time. So with that first, I guess, 12 years for Matthew, what would you say probably the most challenging things? Can you give me a pinpoint, maybe a few things that you found the most challenging for that time of his life?
What was the hardest for me was probably not about me.
Okay.
So it was the fact that he didn't have anyone else he could relate to.
Yeah. So him being alone. It's hard, isn't it? And I think, speaking of someone with cystic fibrosis, you're not an outcast, but it's, if I was to look anything up, it's like, well, you're going to die. And that's a horrible thing to have out there. The doctors treat you, you've got a medical condition. So for me, growing up, I guess I was lucky in the sense that I did have the other kids that were having nasogastric tubes in, or having the needles in their arms and tissuing, and seeing them come through it as well. But when you talk about the pros and cons of that, for me, there's none of them left anymore. I could tell you the name of 20 people I grew up with, and they're not here. Versus the isolated kids now. Cross-infection is huge, and we take it seriously for good reason, and it is isolating. But I think that there's an opportunity there to help.
There is. And, you know, social media has certainly helped with that a lot.
Absolutely.
Matthew's not really interested in social media, and I think in a lot of ways it's really good, but I'd love for him to be able to connect, and I think he will over time do that. But I also think, you know, he's been brought up with a completely different mindset that, you know, he's not CF and he wants to be Matthew. He wants to be himself,
he is, isn't he?
right?
CF is a part of
him. He
him.
doesn't want to be known as the kid with disability or the sick person or the whatever. And I think equally the difficulties were for Josh as well, because as a sibling of somebody who has complex health and disability needs, the impacts on the siblings is quite profound. And for a parent navigating that, and no matter how much attention or what the attention looks like, they're going through huge trauma, and that's just part of it.
Josh is almost on the back burner to a degree, in the sense
well, certainly in his mind, absolutely.
Because, you know, if Matt's sick or something's wrong,
about Matthew.
It has to be about Matthew.
Correct.
And that's just what has to happen. But nonetheless, is, you know, Joshua any less relevant or loved or cared for? But that would be
that
big
was one of the
too. That's
most,
a battle.
Yep, one of the most difficult things. So from the time Matthew was about 5, he was in hospital quite frequently.
I was going to ask you, did he spend quite a lot of time in hospital?
A lot. Yeah. And I would know that he would be okay going into hospital, but I wouldn't know about Josh.
Yeah, okay.
And so people would be able to vouch for the fact that I would be so distraught about how Josh is. Is he getting all the love and the support and the nurturing and everything that he needs? And he's not, because he's not getting it from me, and I can't split myself in two. However, Matthew can't advocate for himself, and we've had so many issues in hospital that I can't trust to leave him on his own. So it's that balancing act. And, you know, they didn't have their father around. And, you know, when family could, they would step in. And I had a couple of friends, you know, through the years that would step in and out. But no one's going to be the same as mum.
No one hugs like your mum, do they?
Right.
That's your comfort.
So, you know, they're both incredibly resilient and they've gone through so much, but it's those things that unless you start talking about it, you don't kind of remember. But if you look back in those first 12 years, that was absolutely devastating. You know, to have to split your family up. Yeah,
and go through.
And effectively choose.
Well, and you're forced to, aren't you? Because what can you do?
Correct.
You know, but you have 2 beautiful boys that you can see they're very proud of their mum and love you. So you should be very proud of who they're becoming. Becoming, absolutely. I say, because they're still growing into, these young men.
Yes.
And I think, you know, Matthew and CF, for him, you know, we were saying before, he's 20, day in the life for him, you know, you've kind of handed the baton to him. Like you said, being able 100%. To advocate for your own CF. When you turn 18, you sort of become you become in the care of the adult CF team.
Yep.
As a parent, I often feel guilty for my mum and dad when I was a teenager, thinking they've done so much work on getting me to be healthy and compliant.
Yes.
Turn 16, I'm going to a party and I'm binge drinking on a few vodka cruises, trying a cigarette for the first time. God forbid, my mum would kill me. Now I'm in my 30s, I look back and go, oh my God.
Such a rat bag.
Such a rat bag, you know, testing the waters. But I was normal. But for a parent, having to let go and let your child, you know, test the waters, maybe not trying the naughty things, but you have to. And then you have to also, as the child or the teenager, learn that, well, if you're going to make those decisions, you've got to be a voice for yourself and you've got to live with the consequences. Yep. So for you as a parent, I'm asking you, not my mum, this, because I'd hate to hear the answer. But how do you hand that baton over and step back a little bit and, you know, let, you know, your child ultimately fuck up for a little bit? Yeah. And how do you manage that?
Well, you don't have any choice.
No.
Right? And it's trial and error.
Yeah.
Right? And it's hard. It's really hard. And it started early for Matthew. He was probably 14 or 15 and wanted to stay in the hospital on his own. And the first few times that was really difficult. But it's like anything, right, in life. You know, this stage prepares you for the next.
Absolutely.
And yes, I do like to have control, but at the end of the day, his life is not mine. And I knew that from early on. And so, you know, I would help him, and we would role play on the way to the hospital if he was having a hospital admission. So if someone wants to do this to you, what are you going to say? Or I'd say, I'm going to be the doctor, you're going to be you. And, you know, we would role play it so that he would learn that he has a voice and that he has a right to have that voice and to say no and to do all of those things. And so they're all, you know, stages to lead up to that self-advocacy and self-determination. Right?
Absolutely. And having that confidence, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think, you know, at the end of the day, I had to resign to the fact that, you know, he's going to make these choices, and maybe it's not do physio or not be compliant with medications. And I think that you all go through it. Anyone would, because it's a really tough gig to do all the things every day in your life, which are, you know, copious amounts of medications and physiotherapy and inhaled this and do that. It's like, my body's not mine, right? I can only imagine. But he had to learn to live with those natural consequences that came with that. Yes. And so that meant a lot of hospitalisation, and it meant hitting rock bottom and clawing his way back up through hard work, and then the cycle would go again. There are so many lessons in that, and they're life lessons, and they're his lessons to learn.
Yeah, and you
know, I can't tell him.
No,
he's got to learn those himself. And I'm really passionate about, you know, our kids going from being kids into adults and having the ability to make decisions and to make choices for themselves. I could easily have just completely taken over, but that wouldn't have been fair to me, and it wouldn't have allowed him to live a life on his terms. Yeah. And so I think for us, we were really lucky when he moved to the Royal Adelaide. Yes. Exceptional team there who were really supportive of that transition. I would love to see, you know, a transition program between the ages of 16 to 22, between, you know, the paediatric and the adult hospital world, that would actually teach them those skills and would reinforce it and would support parents to support their kids to go through that and to help them go through all of those emotions. Yeah, I think when I transitioned to the Royal Adelaide, for me, I remember a nurse, and it's funny and interesting you say this now. There was a nurse in particular who's no longer there, just to confirm that one. But I remember sitting in the chair and she was flushing my port. Yes. And I was looking around and I said, gosh, there's so much work going on around here, because they were renovating, and this was at the old hospital. Yes. And she looked at me and she had a laugh and she went, well, you're all living now, aren't you? So we've got to create better spaces for you. And I looked at her and I thought, I'm a person. I had my littlest at the time, Ava, in the pram next to me, and I thought, I'm not going anywhere. But if they had the mindset then, I think what I'm getting at is traditionally there was a mindset that the transition, it actually wasn't important because we weren't probably going to be around. Like the amount of my friends that transitioned over to the adult life, you know, you're looking at, you're lucky that you're there. Yeah. Now, as an adult, it's like, all right, Emma doesn't want to do this today because of this, this and this, but this is what we're recommending she does. It's in her best interest. Yeah. Made the decisions and then learnt the hard way going, oh, I should have probably had my flu shot because I ended up with influenza. Or, you know, again, the nurse will give you a call just to check in. Haven't done your blood glucose test for 5 years now, Emma. You're probably due. How about we do that?
Probably due. I'm actually doing it next week. But, you know, the support, I think I said it to you before, and anyone listening that's in a hospital or been admitted to a hospital, to be treated as a person, not that medical UR number.
It's like everything.
You leave that place and, you know, anyone can relate. You are a mum, you're a dad, you're a person, you're a, you know, brother, sister, wife, auntie.
Who happens to have
You've got CF. A life. You just have CF. God, it's an interruption to everyone's day. But we've got to deal with it. But the team there are amazing, and they do, you know, for
they're
me,
incredible,
there's hope.
And they're respectful. And I think if there are lessons to learn outside of that team, it would be an awareness for everybody in terms of the health sector and the disability sector is, you know, being very, very careful about your language. And so I can really relate to that, but from a parent perspective. So Matthew wasn't exposed to a lot of social media and probably not, he went looking probably around the time he was 16 or 17, but before then he didn't know about life expectancy. He didn't know, right? So we brought him up. You just have to look after yourself. You can do anything you want. We have to keep you healthy. And then, you know, and that was what we lived by.
Yeah.
And so when, like, because he's had other things happen in his life. So he had a head injury when he was 9, and he's had other things where he's been picked up by an ambulance for X, Y, and Z. And you would say, oh yes, he has cystic fibrosis. And people kind of thought it was a license to just go, oh yes, I knew somebody who had, and the amount of times I've had to eyeball and like,
yeah.
And whether it's nurses, paramedics, doctors, student doctors, whomever come in, need to really think about what you're saying and how you're saying it and the impact that that has on that young person.
Yeah, I agree. And the key word there is I knew, meaning past tense.
Correct.
They're not here.
Correct.
You've got it.
Yeah, and I knew where they were going with it. But he didn't. And I was just like, no, you don't get the right to label him or to instill that on him where he doesn't live a life according to a number or when he's going to die, because that changes the whole life experience, right?
Yeah, totally does. And I think, you know, I've always said, God forbid it happened to you, but you could be hit by a car tomorrow.
Correct.
You could have a brain aneurysm. Anything could happen.
Well, I thought he was going to die from CF. That, you know, in my head, in the back of my brain, that's what will take him. And then he fell 5 metres out of a tree and we nearly lost him. And from that point, he was 9 at the time. Yeah. You know, I was just so grateful that he was here and that he was going to be okay. I didn't know what that his life would look like. But, you know, that gave me significant perspective that anything can happen in life and you can't discount anything. Yeah.
And you know, be grateful for them.
And so having a fixed mindset on how something is going to be won't serve anyone.
No, it doesn't work.
It won't. And so, you know, probably some of the biggest lessons are just live your life and do what you want to do and what you're passionate about.
I think so.
Get in touch with what sets your soul on fire and go from there.
It's cliche, but so true, isn't it? I think too many people, and I laugh now because I can say it because I feel old. But you've got to live those experiences. Like you said, things are lived experiences and you can't teach things unless you learn them for yourself. And then if you know.
Unfortunately.
It'd be nice if you could just follow the rule book, but everyone's rules are different and your lessons all have to be different. I think it's so important that, you know, shouldn't let anything defy you and who you are, what you do. And, you know, we were saying before, you've got to, you know, you push the boundaries, you know, go where what scares you, because that's when things are going to happen.
Yes, we did talk about that. Need to be exactly where fear is and step into it, because the scariest part about, you know, doing something is that lead up. And then once you get there, you know,
then get to the next bit again.
Yeah, and it's all like we said before, it's all lessons. And in the build-up, I remember probably 5 years ago when all of a sudden I realised that, you know, all these tough things were lessons. I remember walking up to the hospital and Matthew was not in a good way and speaking to someone on the phone and going, I hate learning these lessons.
They're not nice.
They're not nice, but they are what make you who you are.
Yeah,
and you know, I wouldn't be doing what I do without having gone through those lessons or those processes.
So you said before that Matthew had quite a big fall at 9 years old.
Yeah.
I would imagine I've got a 9-year-old and she thinks she's invincible. So that would scare the crap out of me. Tell me about the accident and what's happened from that.
So the interesting thing about the accident is I'd been going on a bit of a journey myself to self-discovery, and we'd gone through a bit of a hard time. And for the first time, my mum offered to have my kids for a long weekend so I could travel interstate and go and have a shopping trip with my girlfriends. And so it was the first time that I had been away from the boys for that length of time. And my poor mother, you know, they were exploring the trees and the environment around where they lived, which is the back of Flinders. So it's like hilly and awesome places for young boys to explore. And so basically my boys were rat bags and they were full on and they run and they explore as you would expect.
Yeah, the kids.
And my mum and stepfather had bad backs at the time and couldn't chase after them, and they ran back to a tree that they'd been exploring before and went up the tree. From what I understand, Josh went up, then Matthew went up. And I don't know if Matthew was such a great climber as Josh, and he slipped and fell. And so from what I understand, it was 5 meters. I couldn't tell you for absolute sure. Josh was the only person around. So Josh was 7.
Oh my goodness.
At the time, and he fell to the floor or to the ground. And, he had basically, he'd fractured from the front of his skull and he shattered all the way back. He has a depressed fracture here, which is like broken 3 different vertebrae, so fractured 3 different vertebrae. And I was in Melbourne, and so this was a Sunday afternoon, and I'm trying to call, and I'm like, oh, that's really strange.
Oh my gosh.
And then I got that call, and I've only ever heard my mum's voice like that once since. And that was for the death of my cousin. And you could hear that it wasn't okay. And it took, I think, 4 or 5 hours for me to get from Melbourne back to Adelaide. And I didn't know how he was and didn't have a lot of information. But, it's horrible, particularly for my mum, I think, because, she would say things like, I'll never forgive myself if anything happened, to the boys, or, and her worst nightmare happened.
Yeah.
Long story short, he is okay. It took a long time. Very, very, very lucky boy that he's here, that he doesn't have, a visible physical disability. There are a lot of trauma scars.
Yes.
And from that brain injury, and I think that coupled with cystic fibrosis led into kind of later in life a downward spiral into depression, and he was diagnosed with autism, which we kind of knew he had, but really just didn't want to give him any more labels. Things were very different back when he was younger, and he was getting the support he needed anyway. Just didn't think he needed another label on top of everything else.
Yeah.
But there it is. That's, for him and for Josh, that was probably a defining moment.
Yeah.
In their lives, and it was, and everything in our lives changed completely within 12 months of that accident. Our lives looked completely different, and it wasn't actually for the bad, it was for the better.
How
there's
so?
always light in every, can I swear?
Yeah, absolutely.
In every shitty situation, there is light. There's always lessons, but there's light.
Yeah.
And my husband at the time, he was living, was not their father. He was he was visiting in England because he came from England. And when he came home, everything was different and it was a disaster, and he didn't communicate with us, and I was kind of on my own. He didn't come home straight away, like nothing happened. We ended up eventually separating in the March, but I had found out things, by the December, and Matthew had his accident in the August, and what I discovered through that was what I deserved and how I deserved to be treated, and how my boys deserved to be treated. And if I was allowing myself to be treated in a particular way, I was essentially allowing the same thing for them.
Yeah.
And so, I think you would say I stepped into my power and I put myself and them first, and changed my whole life. I had gone through a big period of losing a huge amount of weight, getting fit, really fixing my mindset, and I realised, hey, I deserve better than this, because I kind of was reserved to, this is my lot in life, I deserve shit.
Which is horrible for you to be stuck in that when you've got so much more than that.
And it would have been devastating for my mum to have seen that as well, I expect.
Heartbreaking.
And so, everything changed, and after the accident, I left a job that, had been amazing for a really long time, but it wasn't fulfilling my soul.
Yeah.
And it wasn't where I needed to be. So I was able to leave that job and restart our lives completely. And it's you know, life's tough. We get that.
But so are you, and so are we.
Exactly. And we're so much better for it. So I think had the accident not changed, the chain of events that happened thereafter perhaps wouldn't have either. And I wouldn't have realised things about myself and about my kids and life that I was able to because of that accident. It was like a disruptor, right, for life.
Yeah. And I think one thing I'm hearing as well is you've sort of accidentally, as a mum, you know, you're an accidental leader. If you're not happy, it's like the saying, you know, if you only got a half-filled cup, how do you pour from a half-filled cup? If you as a mum or a dad or whoever you are, if you are not fulfilling what sets your soul on fire, you know, kids pick up on energy so much. And you've got two very resilient boys. If obviously, you know, like you said, life is hard and we all go through shit, but it's how we get over the shit and overcome it. That's a credit to you as a parent.
That's what defines you. But yeah, you're right, Em, if you're not okay,
well, nothing around you is.
Okay, and I realised that through practice with them, and it was like right in front of my eyes, and that's what kind of led to things later in my life, you know, about helping other people in the same or similar situations. But here we are.
So here we are, Matthew and Joshua. Let's talk just briefly. I mean, we love Joshua. I'm not discrediting
Joshua's beautiful,
him, but I should get him on the show. You know, that'd be interesting to talk about being a brother of a CF, so to speak.
That'd be interesting.
I'd love to know if people are interested in that. I think
they would be. I think there's a lot to be said, and there's a lot of opportunity and potential for siblings.
I think, and I can say, you know, everyone's always laughed, and I've struggled this for myself. Everyone's always like, it's always about Emma. You know, Emma's the glam queen. She's in front of the cameras. I love being in front of the camera, but it's always about me. But from what you said before, it has to be about me when I'm sick, when you're a child. So you're accidentally made to be about yourself, but it's not that I think I'm better than anyone.
I
didn't. Absolutely not. So when I hear that, you know, the sibling, I think of what my brother and sister would be being adopted. You know, I always stood out in family photos. I was the blonde one, and my brother and sister are dark skin. And I always stood up. But anyone with a disability or something, whatever that may be, we do accidentally become in a situation where the world does revolve around us, but it's not. You
don't have a choice.
I don't want it to. God, and I'm a bit like you. If I can help others, that's why we've got the show. And I think I was just seeing in the corner of my eye the name of the show, The Princess of Possible. You know, I've had a joke with the other guests on the show, the boys, they're not princesses, but you know, you as a mother, I think queen is probably a better title, but
I can be a princess.
Princess is, I think, you know, princess, I chose princess because it's more useful. If we're queens, you know, I prefer goddess. But I think, you know, like I said before, it's such a credit to you and your journey where you've come from, going through, you know, everything with both boys, being a single mum for a period of time, going through that, mental health, you know, that we didn't really go too much into that. I know that's a huge topic we could spend a whole nother episode on probably.
Absolutely.
But everyone relates to depression, anxiety, you know, suicide. There are so many taboo topics there that need to be spoken about, and we all go through that stuff in some degree, whether it's us personally or someone we know that's affected in that sense. That's for you to hold the rein and sort of, you know, keep your shit together and bring your life to now where you're very happy, you've got a beautiful glow about you, be a successful businesswoman, which I do want to talk about in a minute. But one thing I think is important to just touch on, the day in the life of Matthew, you know, you said he's got CF, he's a 20-year-old boy. Yeah. I know that he's recently started Trike After, the life-changing drug. He's had COVID, everything else. He's had so much go through still at this age. What does his days look like now, and where do you see him going in the future? Or where does he see him going, I should say?
No day looks the same.
If only.
Yeah, so I will just touch on one thing. I will say in terms of siblings and the person who has the disability, Matthew always wanted to be Josh, and Josh always wanted to be Matthew. You know, he gets the attention whether he likes it or not, and he wanted all the attention. Yes. So I don't think there's a win-win there. It's just the way life is. Yeah. But as far as Matthew's day goes, I don't see it all these days, right? Because he lives his own life. But he will get up and get himself ready and go off. He goes to school. school, loosely termed school, but he's sort of stepped into an adult education, experiential learning situation. And, you know, a year ago he was very depressed and in his room, and for years he wasn't living, you know, a life really that was fulfilling for him. So he's going off and doing all of his normal thing, and then, you know, if he's behaving himself, he'll do physio in the morning or the afternoon.
Does he? What's the one thing he does to? Because I take Creon. I'm compliant with my pancreas.
Yep. So he's pretty good these days with all of his meds. So he'll have, I think there's about 12 different pills that he'll have in the morning and about half that in the evening. So he'll have Trike After, which is this brand new amazing drug that has been simply life-changing. He was really, really sick before he got on Trike After. Yeah. Very, very sick. And he'd spent, I think by the time he had Trike After, he'd spent 14 weeks in hospital since like December. Maybe more, actually more than that. Anyway, a lot. So yeah, he will do physical activity at school and you know, just do all the normal things that other people would do, which is like just the best thing from my perspective.
Wow, that is amazing.
Well, because it's not always been like that, right?
Yeah.
And he wasn't always doing his physio and that sort of thing. And so it was quite astonishing when he started Trike After. The cough kind of went within a week, 2 weeks, then he got COVID. So it's been a bit sort of up and down. But he, you know, at the moment, because he's just had pretty hardcore sinus surgery, so he's clearing his sinuses out a lot, and he's going to have to do that for the rest of his life. But, you know, for all intents and purposes, he's living a normal kind of life. Yeah, you know,
that's amazing.
That is less impacted by CF.
Yeah,
because we couldn't say that 6 months ago, because it was just all IV medications and inhaled medications and physio and people in his face all the time. And if he wasn't at hospital, he was being visited at home by people and trying to go to school. It was really tough.
CF ruled him by the sounds of it.
100%.
But now, do you think Trike After is to thank that he's in this new space?
Oh, without doubt. If he hadn't have had COVID after 2 weeks of having Trike After, I think we would be, you know, a lot further forward. Yeah. However, if he didn't have Trike After, he would have been exceptionally sick in hospital. Yeah. And who knows?
Yeah, we don't even need to go down that path.
His surgery was postponed so he could get on Trike After, so his chest would dry up. So he didn't have complications with surgery because he was on Trike After. And so he's having less other medications. He's not doing physio, which he knows he needs to, but he'll get there. But what he is doing is a lot more exercise than he was before. So, you know, one thing at a time.
Well, it sounds like he's been through a lot. And finally,
it's been tough.
We said it before too, it's a bit cliche, but Trike After sort of allows you to just breathe, you know, and be present and, you know, and slow down. Hope. You're going to have a future.
Because he didn't have hope.
No.
And if you don't have hope, you don't have anything. No, and now he does.
Yeah, which for you, how amazing. You kind of like,
the best.
You've done it. You've done, you got through the worst.
I remember saying when he was born and people would say, oh, you know, there's probably going to be a cure in 10 years' time, and we got to 10 years and it wasn't there, right? And there was nothing like this on the horizon. So it's what we've been waiting for 20 years, and it's finally here. And he kind of wasn't excited about it because he didn't want to get his hopes up. He didn't quite believe.
I was the same.
And you would have been the same. And I really respect that. Yeah. You know, for me as a parent, I was just like ridiculously excited and anxious. But for him,
it's exciting.
The proof is in the pudding.
It absolutely is. I think that's, you know, it's amazing. I don't get speechless very often, but the fact, you know, to know Trike After, for my kids had asked me if that CF bug's gone now. You're not sick anymore, Mummy. You know, you're not coughing. And this, I've had a cough because we've had a little bit of the sickness around the house lately, but it's like, you're not on that drug, Mum. You got to take your medicine properly, Mum. So the kids are onto it and they know. Yeah. But it's just amazing how this one tablet or couple of tablets.
It's life-changing. Like, he's going to school and he will still wear a mask and that. He's really quite vigilant with his personal
take caution.
Health. And I said to him, if people asked you about that cough, and he said, actually, they've said, like, they've noticed that he's not coughing anymore, because he would cough all the time.
And it's embarrassing.
Of course it is. And in times of COVID, right?
Oh my gosh.
Like people look at you like you've got COVID, right?
Yes.
So it's really interesting. That's a whole nother conversation that we could have. But, you know, it's just the simple things like that. He'll get on the train, he's not coughing, so he's not being noticed.
Yeah.
Perfect for him.
Yeah,
because he just
amazing.
wants to be Matthew. He doesn't,
and that's who he is.
He doesn't want to be noticed.
Like I said, CF
doesn't want to have a disability.
It doesn't. Disability, you know, there's that old saying, don't diss the ability. Like CF is very invisible, but it is very serious and can knock you out within a couple of weeks. I think it's amazing that we are so lucky. And I think for parents with children with CF in particular, you know, they'll gain access to Trike After, the younger ones. That's coming. And like you said, the key word is hope. Like we have hope now and we're planning futures and we can do that. Trike After has saved us. So it's exciting.
It is. And I think for anyone like you and Kyle, you know, sometimes you'll live life in spite of and to give it the big
the big fuck you. I'm doing
the big fuck you. So and Matthew has been the same this year, and I look at you and I look at Kyle for that inspo, and you know he walked a 32-kilometre day earlier this year, like a big trek, and that was before he was on Trike After.
Absolutely.
And I was like, oh, you sure you can't do this? And you're coughing and whatever. But he's like, absolutely, nothing's going to stop me.
Exactly.
And I think that hope has come from, you know, the anticipation of getting Trike After, and actually I can do whatever I like in my life regardless.
And the big FU is like, you know what, it's more so to the medical research and Google going, guess what, Google? I've actually defied the odds and we're all going to be around for a lot longer. CF is not actually going to be hopefully as scary like it was back in the day.
I think we're totally over.
I know, we are.
I could talk forever.
We could. How have we gone, Rory?
Well, quite a bit over. Probably a good time to start wrapping it up.
Okay. Okay, so what do you get when you have two women sat in a room that could talk about lots is we could talk for hours. And I would love to keep talking to you. One thing I do want you to tell me in like a minute. I'm going to put the pressure on. 1 minute. Your business, The Carer's Place.
Yes.
I was introduced to that probably more on a personal level with my dad, and I got to see the work that you guys do. And I really want to bring that up because I think what you've gone through with Matthew, you know, and I guess even with your whole family, you've learnt some things. Tell me in a minute about The Carer's Place.
Yeah. Look, basically with The Carer's Place, I was looking for a job and I couldn't see myself being employable. And so, you know, I went through a process, what am I good at? And it was caring and supporting others. And so I set about building a business, and that one I would want to work for, but two, that I would have wanted to have accessed for Matthew had I had that chance. And so it grew from there, and now I employ people who are in exactly the same position where they're looking to, you know, carers and parents and people with disability looking to go back into the workforce, and who have amazing skills that they've amassed over the years and experiences, and they move into the world of support coordination and are able to use their personal experiences and their professional experience to help others. And so that's it in a
nutshell.
Yeah.
So I'd encourage anyone to check it out. You do have a website, and I'll make sure we pop up the links. And the world of social media now, you know, I will make sure people should check out what you do, because it's probably quite a unique business or organisation that you run. And I think it is so important. I think it's such a credit to you. Anyone can appreciate, you know, being a mum's hard work, let alone add all the other elements of CF and everything else that come into it. But when you can do something and become successful and create what you've created, you are amazing. So well guess, done.
Thank you. And at the end of the day, to finish that off really is, if I can help someone navigate and not do things quite as tough as perhaps I have or Matthew has, and they can live a less stressed life, then my job is done.
What a good feeling, hey?
Yeah.
God, you're a good person. Isn't she wonderful?
Thanks. You know, we attract like to like.
Oh, I'm a bit crazy.
So
But no, in all honesty, thank you. I know today was a bit of a where are we going to go with this conversation. But
That's good.
I'm really grateful. I'm hoping that a lot of people have learned a lot, and hopefully not too many tears have brought up from people today. So thanks, Cass.
Thank you for having me.
So
Gorgeous
welcome.
girl.
Thank you. Thanks for listening today. For more information on upcoming episodes, or you just want to check out what I'm up to, head over to my Instagram, CF Mummy. Now, I put it to you to go and make the impossible possible.